Hey everyone, this is Michael again, and welcome to the Smackdown and AEW Rampage review. Smackdown tonight was from the T-Mobile Center in Kansas City, Missouri, while Rampage was taped from the Wolstein Center in Cleveland, Ohio. And Smackdown, this was their go-home show for the Royal Rumble, which is tomorrow night, which I will be reviewing the Rumble tomorrow. So stay tuned for that tomorrow night. And SmackDown as a whole tonight was absolutely horrendous as usual. Fucking terrible. God awful. We had Sheamus and Holland versus Cesaro and Ricochet. We had Naomi versus Sonya Deville. Naomi after 153 days that Sonya Deville has been tormenting her. She finally got her hands on Sonya Deville tonight. We also saw Insane segment, which was absolutely awful. We had Nakamura and Rick Boogs. Nakamura cleared to compete again. And they ended up taking on Jinder Mahal and Shanky. And we also had Big E and Kofi Kingston versus Corbin and Moss, the Joker and the Riddler. But overall, SmackDown tonight, like I said, absolutely horrendous show. And of course, in the main event segment, we had a face-to-face between the Tribal Chief Roman Reigns and Seth Rollins. But let's jump right into the review. SmackDown opened up tonight with the SmackDown Women's Champion, Charlotte Flair. And WWE was trying to tell us to change the fucking channel there. Because whenever Charlotte comes out and delivers a promo, it is doze-off material. So Charlotte ended up coming out. Of course, she had pyro. Michael Cole on commentary, he was hyping up the disaster that's going to be the Women's Rumble tomorrow night. I mean, look who they got returning for the Women's Rumble. The Bella Twins. Really? The Bella Twins? And you know John Laurinaitis ended up putting the Bellas in there because they're family. So we also have Lita and Michelle McCool, Kelly, Summer Rae, which WWE had the balls to call Summer Rae a legend. They end up calling Summer Rae a legend. Give me a break. Summer Rae a legend. Mickie James. Mickie James is an Impact superstar. She's the Knockouts champion. And this is a superstar that WWE treated poorly. They released her and they end up sending her gear back in a garbage bag. And yet she decides to come back after they did that to her. Unbelievable. So then you have, Shotzi in it, Natalya, Aaliyah. This is going to be the worst Women's Rumble, in my opinion. This is a disaster incoming. So we had Charlotte get on the mic. She ended up saying that it is her honor as champion to do something that the Kansas City Chiefs and quarterback Patrick Mahomes will never do again. And that is bring a title to the city. So the Kansas City fans end up booing Charlotte. Charlotte ended up saying that the fans aren't the only ones heartbroken, as 29 other women will be beat up and tossed out of the ring by her in the Women's Rumble tomorrow night. Why is Charlotte even in the Rumble? She's a SmackDown Women's Champion. Why are they having her in the Rumble? We should be having a woman win the Rumble and facing Charlotte at WrestleMania. Doesn't make sense why Charlotte is in the Rumble when she's the champion. So Charlotte ended up going on about the Rumble and how dominant she is. She ended up saying that usually the Rumble winner picks their champion to challenge at WrestleMania. But she will change the game this weekend when she picks her challenger. And then out came Shayna Baszler. Shayna Baszler got new music, which sounded fucking terrible. What was so wrong with Shayna Baszler's old music? It made her look like a badass. This once again WWE changing things up with a superstar. If it's not broke, don't fix it. Don't change up their theme music. Don't change up their name. If it's not broke, don't fix it. So Shayna Baszler came out. She got on the mic. Baszler ended up apologizing. She ended up saying all that talk about bodies breaking in the Rumble was music to her ears. And that is her kind of language. She ended up giving Charlotte some props, and she ended up warning that she will not hesitate to snap Charlotte like a twig, limb by limb, if it ends up just the two of them again tomorrow night. Baszler ended up promising that after she tosses Charlotte over the top rope, she won't waste any time in picking Charlotte as her opponent at WrestleMania. She ended up saying that she will just have time for her limbs to heal up. And then out came Aaliyah. Yeah, Aaliyah, who beat Natalya in 3 minutes and 17 seconds. So Aaliyah came out, she was wearing a Aaliyah 317 shirt, which is a disgrace to Stone Cold Steve Austin's 316. So Aaliyah ended up saying that she doesn't know if it's okay for her to be here, but it seems like just anyone can come out. So Charlotte ended up asking who she is. So Aaliyah ended up introducing herself, and she ended up saying, I'm the one who beat Natalya in 3 minutes 17 seconds. She ended up saying that she has a lot of butterflies in her stomach ahead of her first Rumble match, which could lead to her first WrestleMania. So Aaliyah came into the ring. Charlotte ended up saying that she has Aaliyah has zero chances of winning the Rumble, which I'm not going to say that Charlotte is wrong about that. So Aaliyah probably doesn't have a chance at winning the Rumble. She's not winning. So Aaliyah ended up bragging about her record-setting win over Natalya in 3 minutes and 17 seconds. She ended up saying that she's optimistic. So then out came Natalya. Of course, once Aaliyah mentioned, her being Natalya and her record-setting time, obviously I knew Natalya was going to come out. So Natalya ended up coming out. She ended up trashing to Aaliyah. Ended up saying that her record-setting win was a fluke. So Natalya ended up bragging about being a 3-time Guinness World Record holder. And she ended up saying that she will make it 4 tomorrow night. She will make it 4 Guinness World Record holder wins. So then out came Shotzi. Shotzi Blackheart ended up coming out. Well, finally they end up using Shotzi on TV. When was the last time we saw her? I can't remember. So Shotzi ended up coming out. She ended up saying, what a preview this is of tomorrow night. All these massive egos clashing and descending into chaos, creating the perfect opportunity for someone like her, someone exactly like her, to sneak right in and seize the spotlight. So we had these women argue. Charlotte ended up saying, this is enough. None of you belong in the ring with me and none of you stand a chance tomorrow night. And then out came Sasha Banks. Sasha ended up making a return, got a huge pop from the Kansas City crowd, which they should have held off Sasha's return for the Women's Rumble tomorrow night. It would have been a surprise, like a John Cena, returns at Royal Rumble 2008 and Madison Square Garden type surprise. But we all know WWE, they don't like doing surprises anymore. So they end up just, having Sasha Banks return tonight on Smackdown, which everybody knows that WWE should have held Sasha's return until tomorrow night, which they didn't want to do. So Sasha ended up getting in the ring. She ended up declaring that the boss is back, baby, and that she's ready to rumble. Sasha then dropped the mic. She stared down at Charlotte. Charlotte then ended up stepping forward, and she turned to Sasha and started taunting her. Sasha ended up slugging Charlotte, decked her with a right hand. Charlotte went down, and we had the other woman brawling as Sasha ended up watching from the apron. Natalya ended up dropping Aaliyah in the corner, and she turned around to drop Charlotte. Aaliyah ended up dropping Natalya with an enziguri. Shayna Baszler ended up charging at Aaliyah, and Aaliyah ended up sending Shayna Baszler to the floor. She then turned around, and Natalya delivered a boot to Aaliyah. Charlotte and Sasha were the only two in the ring. Charlotte ended up turning around. Sasha was staring at her. Sasha catched a kick from Charlotte. She ended up insulting Charlotte, and she was acting like Charlotte ended up smelling. And she ended up dropping Charlotte over the top rope out to the floor. And Sasha was the only one that was in the ring. And that was that. But overall, this was just a very meh opening to SmackDown. Charlotte in there, whenever she delivers a promo, it's sleep-inducing. And then we have Megan Moran. She was backstage with Sheamus and Ridge Holland. Megan Moran ended up asking the both of them about facing Cesaro and Ricochet tonight, which this was a rematch of their pre-show match at day one. So Ridge Holland ended up telling Megan Moran that he can still hear the crunch of his nose breaking at day one by Ricochet. He ended up saying now it's his turn to return the favor and smash Ricochet like the parasite he is. So Sheamus ended up going on about ways that Ridge Holland is just like him. And then Sheamus ended up presenting Ridge Holland with a face mask like he used to wear, like Sheamus used to wear. What is it with face mask and WWE? First Sheamus, then Carmella, which Carmella is still wearing her face mask, and now Ridge Holland. What is it with this? With WWE and the face masks for their superstars? Like I said, Sheamus wore one, Carmella is still wearing one, and now Ridge Holland. Why? And now we have Ridge Holland and Sheamus versus Cesaro and Ricochet. Their rematch from the pre-show kickoff at day one. This was an okay match here. We had Ridge Holland and Sheamus end up coming out first. And as SmackDown came back from the commercial, we had Cesaro end up making his way out. And then Ricochet had a pre-recorded promo where he announced his spot for the Men's Rumble. So Sheamus ended up starting off with Cesaro. They end up blocking up. They end up going to the ropes and then to the corner. Sheamus then ended up pushing Cesaro away. They started arguing. Sheamus ended up taking Cesaro down. Sheamus ended up going out to the floor for a breather. So Sheamus came back in. He started fighting back at Cesaro. Cesaro ended up taking Sheamus down to the mat with a headlock. Sheamus then ended up mounting some offense, but Cesaro ended up leveling him with a clothesline. So Cesaro ended up bringing Sheamus into the corner. Ricochet ended up coming in off the top rope with an axe handle. Sheamus ended up turning around on Ricochet, and then Rich Holland ended up coming in. Rich Holland ended up sending Ricochet to the floor, and he kept control of the match. Ricochet ended up flying and ended up taking Rich Holland down at ringside. And as Smackdown came back from the commercial, Ricochet ended up fighting Sheamus off, and Sheamus ended up catching him with a Irish Curse backbreaker. And Rich Holland ended up coming back in. Rich Holland ended up manhandling Ricochet around the ring from corner to corner. Rich Holland delivered a big overhead throw from the corner to Ricochet. And Rich Holland ended up keeping Ricochet down. He ended up slamming Ricochet in the middle of the ring. He then dropped an elbow. He went for the cover. Ricochet ended up kicking out at 2. Holland ended up bending Ricochet over his shoulder. And Ricochet ended up getting back up. He ended up taking Holland down. And both guys were laid out on the mat. Sheamus and Cesaro ended up taking in at the same time. Cesaro started unloading and delivering some uppercuts to Sheamus in the corner. Sheamus then ended up running to a back elbow from Cesaro, and Cesaro ended up nailing a corkscrew uppercut. Cesaro then ended up dumping Sheamus over the top rope out to the floor. He run around the ring. He ended up smashing Sheamus into the barricade with a running uppercut. He brought Sheamus back into the ring. He went up to the top. Cesaro delivered a crossbody, and he went for the cover, which Sheamus ended up kicking out. Cesaro then ended up blocking the Irish Curse backbreaker, and he ended up rolling Sheamus up for a 2 count, and Rich Holland ended up running to break up the pin. Ricochet ended up flying off the top rope with a missile drop kick to Rich Holland. And at the end of the match, we had Rich Holland end up running in. He ended up dropping Cesaro with the headbutt using the face mask. So Holland ended up dropping Cesaro with the Northern Grit, and he went for the cover. And there you go. Rich Holland and Sheamus ended up winning the match. So post-match, we saw Cesaro. He was clutching his nose. Michael Cole on commentary ended up saying that Cesaro may have suffered a broken nose from that headbutt with the mask. And that was that. Overall, okay match from these guys. So then we had Naomi versus Sonya Deville. And this was a good match here. They delivered both Naomi and Sonya Deville. Sonya Deville has been torturing Naomi for 153 days. And this all started back in August. WWE, with the storyline, they didn't even know where to take the storyline. And I'm just like, can we get this match over with and end this feud between Naomi and Sonya Deville? So we had the match, and Sonya Deville was backstage because Naomi ended up making her way out first. Sonya Deville was backstage with referee Dan Engler, and she was talking down to Dan Engler, saying that he works for her. And when Naomi goes down and she pins Naomi, he must, follow her orders. So Dan Engler ended up interrupting Sonya Deville, ended up saying that he's sorry and that he has to call the match down the middle. So Sonya Deville wasn't happy about that. So as SmackDown came back from the commercial, Sonya Deville ended up making her way out. And so Dan Engler ended up saying to both Naomi and Sonya Deville that he expects a fair and clean match, and that he's going to call it down the middle. So Sonya Deville ended up staring at him. The bell ended up ringing. Sonya Deville ended up missing at Naomi, and she ended up going to the corner for a breather. Naomi ended up trying to stay on Sonya Deville. Sonya Deville ended up yelling at Naomi to get back. Sonya Deville ended up ducking a lockup attempt, and she ended up going to the corner, and Naomi wasn't happy. So Naomi ended up going to lock up again at Sonya Deville. Sonya Deville ended up kicking her and started working her over, and she ended up tackling Naomi. And Sonya Deville, she hasn't even competed in the ring in a year and a half. So Sonya Deville was spotting some ring rust here a little bit. The match in the beginning started off slow, and then it picked up. So Sonya Deville ended up mounting Naomi with some left and rights. She started stomping away at Naomi in the corner. Sonya Deville ended up slamming Naomi face first into the mat. Started grounding her, started talking some trash. So Naomi ended up sending Sonya Deville to the apron, and she ended up rocking Sonya Deville in the corner. Sonya Deville ended up blocking the move from Naomi. She ended up kicking Naomi down, started pounding on her, and she ended up going for the cover, which Naomi ended up kicking out too. So Sonya Deville was yelling at Dan Engler to count faster. Naomi ended up rocking Sonya Deville, ended up drop kicking her. Naomi ended up rocking Sonya Deville in the mouth, ended up sending her out to the floor. So Naomi ended up sending Sonya Deville face first into the edge of the apron, and then rolled her back into the ring, went for the cover. Sonya Deville kicked out too. She then rolled back out to the floor, and Naomi ended up going for a baseball slide under the bottom rope. Sonya Deville ended up catching Naomi, ended up dropping her to the floor with a draping DDT. So as SmackDown came back from the commercial, both Naomi and Sonya Deville were in the ring. Deville ended up countering a move, ended up dropping Naomi with a spine buster. She ended up going for the cover, which Naomi kicked out too. So Sonya Deville kept control of the match, and she was just keeping Naomi down. Naomi then ended up making her way up. She ended up kicking Sonya Deville in the head, and she delivered another kick and a springboard kick to Sonya Deville's face from the corner, which stunned her. Naomi ended up delivering a springboard stunner to Sonya Deville, and she started unloading in the corner. She then delivered a running bulldog into the middle turnbuckle to Sonya Deville. Naomi ended up going back up to the top. She delivered a crossbody. She went for the cover. Deville ended up kicking out. So Naomi ended up delivering a leg drop, and she went for the cover. Sonya Deville still kicked out too. So Sonya Deville ended up going for a vertical suplex. Naomi countered that and turned it into a snap DDT. So she went for the cover. Deville ended up kicking out too. And at the end of the match, we had Naomi end up delivering the rear view to Sonya Deville. Naomi then followed that up with a top rope split-legged moonsault, and she went for the cover. And there you go. Naomi ended up winning the match. So post-match, we had Sonya Deville end up retreating to the back, and Naomi was celebrating. Naomi ended up getting on the mic, and she ended up telling the fans that we finally did it. Naomi ended up saying that after 153 days of Sonya Deville tormenting her, it still wasn't enough to stop the glow. So Sonya Deville was on the stage on the entranceway. Naomi ended up saying somehow she still managed to shine through, just like she will when she wins the Rumble. So Naomi was taunting Sonya Deville, ended up telling her not to slip on her tears on the way out. So Naomi ended up leading the crowd and singing goodbye to Sonya Deville. So Sonya Deville went to the back, and she then came back out. She was now wearing a jacket. So Sonya Deville was furious. She was yelling for Naomi's music to be cut. So Deville ended up going on about how excited Naomi is for the Rumble. She ended up saying that as a WWE official, she can't let Naomi go into the Rumble without a little surprise. And that surprise is a special guest entrant into the Rumble. So she ended up saying that the special guest entrance in the Rumble is herself, Sonya Deville. So Sonya has put herself into the Rumble. So she ended up tossing the mic and walked off to the back. And somehow this feud is still going to continue into the Rumble tomorrow. Just when we all thought that this feud was over after this match, yet WWE has got to take it into the Women's Rumble. Unbelievable. But overall, this was a good match between Naomi and Sonya Deville. Very entertaining match. And both of them worked really well in the match. So really enjoyed it. And then we had Kayla Braxton. Kayla Braxton was backstage with the Usos. Jimmy and Jay end up telling Kayla Braxton that they aren't worried about being banned from ringside during their cousin, Roman Reigns' match with Seth Rollins tomorrow at the Rumble. They are saying that because no matter what, one thing will remain the same, and still Universal Champion, the Tribal Chief, Roman Reigns. So the Viking Raiders end up walking up Eric and Ivar, and the Usos end up acknowledging them as their new challengers. The Usos end up saying that the Viking Raiders stink. Eric and Ivar end up admitting that they do love a good feast, and they do come with a manly odor, but they also love their axes. So both of them, Eric and Ivar, had their axes, and they end up throwing the Usos with the axes, and that was that. And then we had Sami Zayn. Sami Zayn ended up coming out for another awful, insane segment. So Sami was sitting at the table in the ring, and this insane segment was like a podcast. Sami Zayn was trying to do a podcast, and Jinder Mahal and Shanky were his guests. So Sami ended up saying that they repackaged things because the stunts and pranks got a little out of hand. And due to Johnny Knoxville, he almost went to the hospital. So Sami ended up saying that because of this, Insane is now a live podcast talk show. And that's not a stunt show. So he introduced Shanky and Jinder Mahal, saying that they will be in tag team action tonight. So Sami Zayn ended up knocking Rick Boogs and Shinsuke Nakamura, which Sami Zayn ended up saying that Nakamura owes him a title match. So Sami ended up thanking Jinder and Shanky for being here. Jinder ended up thanking Sami, ended up saying that it's an honor to be on his pilot episode. So Sami ended up interrupting Jinder. He ended up going on about how he doesn't want to talk about Johnny Knoxville and never wants to hear his name again. So Sami ended up saying that they will edit that part out because the fans were chanting for Johnny Knoxville. Sami ended up saying that this is a show for intellectuals now and will be for smart people only. So Jinder ended up talking about dealing with Shinsuke Nakamura, and Jinder ended up saying that they both have proteges now and that he has Shanky. So Sami ended up apologizing because he ended up saying that Shanky has probably never even heard of Johnny Knoxville. So Jinder ended up saying that actually Johnny Knoxville and Jackass are huge in India and all around the world. Shanky ended up saying that he loved the bungee porta potty stunt. And I'm like, wow, Shanky could actually talk. They actually made Shanky talk. So Sami ended up saying that he doesn't believe Jackass has worldwide fame. He ended up saying that the show is probably only for the kind of locals you'd find in Kansas City. Well, the fans were booing Sami, and Sami ended up saying, "Oh yeah, that will also be edited out." So out came Rick Boogs. Of course, he ended up introducing himself. He gave an introduction to Nakamura, of course. So they end up making their way down. So Nakamura ended up kicking Sami Zayn out of nowhere, sending him out of the ring, out to the floor. Sami looked like he was going to rush into the ring to fight back, and he ended up staying on the outside. So that was that. Overall, this was just a waste of time. This was a waste of a segment. These insane segments have been fucking awful. Sami Zayn is awesome, but these segments have been absolutely awful. These insane segments. And then we had Shinsuke Nakamura and Rick Boogs versus Jinder Mahal and Shanky. This was boring. This was absolutely boring. Nakamura was going at it with Jinder Mahal. Sami Zayn was on commentary during the match. Nakamura took control and he tagged in Rick Boogs. Nakamura ended up sending Jinder Mahal into Rick Boogs, and Boogs ended up doing a slam to Jinder. Boogs kept controlling the match, and Shanky ended up coming in. Shanky and Boogs ended up facing off. Boogs ended up overpowering Shanky in the corner. Shanky turned it around, started beating Boogs into the corner. Boogs ended up fighting both Jinder and Shanky. He ended up knocking Jinder off the apron. Shanky ended up grabbing Boogs for a tight hold, and Boogs ended up powered up with a suplex. So both Shanky and Boogs were down. So we had Jinder end up coming back to the ring. Sami Zayn ended up running over. He ended up yanking Shinsuke Nakamura off the apron, sending Nakamura face first into the edge of the apron. So Jinder ended up working over Boogs in the corner, and Shanky ended up tagging in, and Jinder and Shanky ended up double teaming on Boogs, and Boogs ended up fighting both Shanky and Jinder. Boogs ended up dropping Jinder with a polished hammer, and then Boogs ended up dropping Shanky with the polished hammer, and Boogs ended up strutting around. He managed to get Shanky up into the abdominal stretch, and Boogs ended up delivering the Boogs Cruise Slam to Shanky, and he went for the cover, and there you go. Boogs and Nakamura ended up winning the match. So post-match, Sami Zayn was talking trash, started taunting Nakamura from the stage. But overall, awful match. Absolutely boring. So then we had Kayla Braxton backstage with Big E and Kofi Kingston. They end up talking about how when one of them win the Rumble, they all win. So that was that. And then we had the New Day versus Happy Corbin and Madcap Moss. This was awful. New Day versus Joker and the Riddler. So we had a pre-recorded promo from Corbin and Moss. Please stop giving Corbin and Moss a mic or making them do a pre-recorded promos. Please, stop it. So Corbin and Moss end up talking about how it will feel good to embarrass the New Day. Moss end up cracking a joke on McIntyre. A lame joke as always. And of course, both of them start laughing. So the match ended up starting. Moss and Big E end up going at it. Moss end up dodging a move, end up dropping Big E. Moss end up running the ropes. He ended up getting dropped by a back elbow from Big E. End up going for the cover. Moss kicked out at 2. So Big E and Kofi end up double teaming on Moss. And Kofi ended up going for the cover. Moss kicked out at 2. Corbin then tagged in. He ended up sending Kofi to the corner, splashed him, and tossed him to the mat. So he ended up knocking Big E off the apron. Corbin ended up running into a corner kick from Kofi. Kofi ended up coming off the top rope and nailed Corbin with a drop kick. Moss then came in. Kofi ended up drop kicking Moss to the floor. Kofi ended up going up to the top. He leaped out to the floor, and Corbin and Moss end up both catching Kofi in midair, and end up ramming Kofi face first into the ring post, which we heard the slam of Kofi's face off of the ring post. So as SmackDown came back from the commercial, Moss was in control of the match. He was stomping away in the corner to keep Kofi down. Corbin ended up coming back in, and Kofi ended up blocking a double team. He ended up tagging Big E. Big E ended up launching Corbin, and then he launched Moss with belly-to-belly throws. So Big E ended up delivering the Uranagi to Corbin. He ended up hitting Corbin with another belly-to-belly. So Big E was dancing over Corbin. He ended up running the ropes and delivered a splash. So at the end of the match, we had Moss end up running into a boot from Kofi in the corner. Big E ended up coming in, and Big E and Kofi end up hitting the Midnight Hour. So then going for the cover, and there you go. The New Day ended up winning the match. Overall, match was awful. So then we had the main event segment. Roman Reigns ended up coming out, the Tribal Chief, the Universal Champion. Of course, Reigns does his shtick where he raises the Universal Championship in the air, and pyro goes off. And as SmackDown came back from the commercial, Reigns was in the ring, and before Reigns could speak, Seth Rollins ended up coming out. Rollins ended up getting into the ring. Reigns ended up staring him down. So Reigns ended up taking the mic as Rollins was playing to the crowd. Reigns then ended up calling on Kansas City to acknowledge him. So very mixed reaction from Kansas City. Most of them cheered him, and others ended up booing him. So Rollins ended up taunting Reigns and acknowledges that he played Reigns like a fiddle last week. He congratulated Reigns on getting his cousins disqualified last week, making their Rumble match one-on-one. Reigns ended up saying that it was a decision to sit around and let Rollins embarrass his family, the bloodline, or to punch him in the face and get the same result. Rollins ended up saying that Reigns brought more shame to the family than anybody if getting pinned by him means embarrassment. So Reigns ended up saying that he said this last week, but again, Rollins is living in the past because he is in God mode now, Reigns. So Rollins ended up telling some of him and Reigns' moments from the past, and Reigns was like, oh, it's all water under the bridge. So Rollins ended up asking Reigns, what about the time when he took a chair to Reigns' back and changed the game forever? When he broke up the Shield. So Reigns got a bit angry at that. Rollins kept on taunting him. So Rollins ended up saying, oh, that one stings a little bit. Rollins ended up saying that he knew what he was doing when he used the chair on Reigns. It was for his own good. And he knew it would catapult Reigns into stardom. Rollins ended up saying that Reigns should thank him for all the money, the private jets, and everything else he received since then. So Rollins ended up saying that Reigns has done it all, except one thing, and that is beat him when it matters the most. Rollins ended up saying that he wants Reigns to know it's not personal when he takes the title tomorrow night, when he takes the Universal Championship tomorrow. Rollins ended up saying, my brother, I will always love you. So Rollins then ended up laughing, and Reigns was seething. Rollins was continuing to taunt Reigns. Rollins ended up laughing some more. He ended up dancing around the ring. Reigns ended up mentioning how Rollins used that chair on his back to break the Shield up. Reigns ended up saying that he has tried to forgive Rollins. He really has. But he will never forgive Rollins for what he did to us, the Shield. Reigns ended up saying that he hates Rollins. So Rollins ended up laughing. He ended up saying that he knows Reigns hates him. He wanted to say that Reigns calls him a clown. But the joke is Reigns and his title reign, the bloodline, his cousins, his whole family, his daddy and uncle. And tomorrow night, it all goes up in smoke. Rollins then laughed again. Reigns shoved him, and he was furious. So Rollins wasn't fazed by Reigns shoving him. He was just laughing some more. Reigns ended up walking past Rollins to get out of the ring. They ended up bumping shoulders on purpose. And Reigns immediately turned back around. He tried to connect with the Superman punch. Rollins ended up ducking it and rolled out of the ring. So Rollins then ended up dancing his way up the stage, taunting Reigns, still laughing. And that was how Smackdown went off the air. I'm looking forward to Seth Rollins and Roman Reigns tomorrow. Hopefully, WWE doesn't take the title off of Roman Reigns, because if they do, all this whole build with Reigns and him as a tribal chief and him as a Universal Champion just all goes down the drain if they make Rollins win the Universal Championship tomorrow night. Hopefully, Reigns retains the Universal Championship, which we probably all know he will. But I hope WWE doesn't fuck this up and puts the title on Rollins. So it should be a good match between the both of them. But overall, SmackDown was horrendous, and it did nothing to hype you up for the Rumble tomorrow. So now we move on to AEW Rampage. Rampage was a good show tonight. We have Moxley versus Anthony Bowens, FTR versus Lee Johnson and Brock Anderson. The TBS Championship was on the line where Jade Cargill defended the title against Julia Hart. And in the main event, the AEW World Tag Team Championship was on the line where the Jurassic Express, Jungle Boy, and Luchasaurus defend the titles against Private Party, Isaiah Cassidy, and Mark Gwen. But it was a good show tonight. So Rampage opened up with Jon Moxley versus Anthony Bowens. This was a good match here. So Moxley ended up making his way out first. Got a pop from the Cleveland crowd because this is in his hometown. So then the Acclaimed ended up coming out. Max Caster ended up rapping about Moxley, saying, "Your wifey still ain't called me back." Of course, talking about Renee Paquette, Moxley's wife. So we had Caster end up finishing that off with the network called. They said, "Watch your mouth." So then Moxley ended up attacking Max Caster, and he then went to Anthony Bowens. He ended up chopping Anthony Bowens in the corner. Moxley started stomping away on Bowens, ended up mounting Bowens in the corner with some punches. Moxley ended up moving Bowens to the center of the ring. He started laying in some slaps to Bowens' back. Bowens then ended up rolling to the outside. Moxley ended up throwing Bowens into the barricade. He then ended up throwing Bowens into another side of the barricade. So we had Aubrey Edwards, who was the referee. She ended up raising her hand for a cheap pop. Moxley ended up heading into the crowd to continue to brawl with Bowens. Moxley ended up bringing Bowens back to ringside. He ended up pulling Bowens' arm against the ring post. Bowens ended up sending Moxley into the ring post. So Bowens ended up getting Moxley into the ring, started laying in some punches on Moxley. Bowens took Moxley into the corner, started chopping at him. Bowens pulled Moxley's arm across the top rope, and he followed that up with a Russian leg sweep. Bowens ended up pulling Moxley to his feet. He ended up trying to go for a suplex to Moxley, but Moxley ended up blocking the suplex and delivered some knees and a suplex to retake control of the match. So Moxley ended up kicking Bowens while he was on his knees. Moxley then run against the ropes. Max Caster ended up grabbing Moxley's foot, and Bowens took control of the match. He ended up going for the cover, and Moxley ended up kicking out too. So Bowens then followed it up and delivered a neckbreaker to Moxley. So as Rampage came back from the commercial, both Moxley and Bowens were on the top rope. Moxley was going for a avalanche paradigm shift, but Bowens ended up escaping, and Bowens ended up hitting a drop kick to Moxley. He brought Moxley back in with a superplex, which was awesome. It was an awesome superplex. And Bowens went for the cover. Moxley ended up kicking out too. So Bowens ended up going up to the second rope. He ended up diving into a boot by Moxley. Bowens ended up charging, and Moxley ended up sending him over the top rope and on top of Max Caster. Moxley then ended up hitting a suicide dive that hit Max Caster because Bowens ended up moving out of the way. Bowens then ended up catching Moxley, coming back into the ring with a DDT, and he ended up going for the cover, and Moxley ended up kicking out too. So at the end of the match, we had Moxley was on his knees. He was encouraging Bowens to bring it. So Bowens ended up putting Moxley down with some forearm strikes. Max Caster ended up distracting Aubrey Edwards as Bowens ended up going for the boombox. So Aubrey Edwards ended up catching Bowens, and she ended up telling him, "Oh, you can't use that." So as Aubrey Edwards ended up tossing the boombox out of the ring, Bowens ended up getting a chain that Max Caster ended up throwing to him. So Bowens was going to hit Moxley with a chain. Moxley ended up avoiding it. He ended up hitting the cutter to Bowens, which was nice. It was a nice cutter. And then Moxley ended up following it up with a paradigm shift. And he went for the cover. And there you go. Jon Moxley ended up winning the match. And then, post-match, it showed Bryan Danielson watching from backstage. So more tease of Moxley and Bryan, which we're going to get. We're going to get that at some point, Moxley versus Bryan. That's going to be an awesome matchup there between the both of them. But overall, this was a good match between Moxley and Anthony Bowens. So then, when Rampage came back from the commercial, it was announced that Ruby Soho and Nyla Rose are going to have a match this Wednesday on Dynamite. And it should be a good match, and Ruby Soho will probably end up winning the match. And then we went backstage and we saw Andrade El Idolo along with his assistant Jose. And they located Sting's room. So they go in it, and Darby Allin is in there. Andrade ended up handing a contract to Darby Allin. So Darby Allin ended up laughing at Andrade. And Darby ended up saying that he respects Andrade as a wrestler. But he wonders if Andrade has lost his mind. So Darby Allin ended up telling Andrade that his dignity is not something that he can buy, that Andrade can buy. So Darby Allin ended up telling Andrade and Jose to get out of the locker room. So he then pulled out a baseball bat. So Andrade and Jose ended up leaving, and that was that. But like I said, this is the best that they got for Andrade here. Andrade deserves better. And then we had FTR versus Lee Johnson and Brock Anderson. Of course, FTR came out along with Tully Blanchard, Lee Johnson and Brock Anderson end up coming out along with Arn. And this was a good match here. We had Cash Wheeler and Lee Johnson start off the match. Wheeler ended up putting Johnson down with some shoulder tackles. Johnson ended up making a blind tag to Brock, and Brock ended up taking down Wheeler. Dax Harwood then tagged in. Brock Anderson and Harwood started trading holds. Harwood ended up going for a shoulder tackle, but Anderson ended up barely budging. Wheeler ended up trying to sneak attack on Brock Anderson, and that didn't work, so Anderson ended up tagging in Lee Johnson. Johnson ended up hitting both Wheeler and Harwood with dives out to the outside. Harwood ended up getting back in the ring. Lee Johnson ended up hitting a diving crossbody from the top rope, and he went for the cover, which Harwood ended up kicking out at 2. So as Rampage came back from the commercial, FTR were in control of the match. Lee Johnson ended up hitting a neck breaker, and he couldn't reach Brock Anderson for the tag. So Johnson ended up escaping. He ended up tagging in Brock Anderson. Brock Anderson ended up laying out both Harwood and Wheeler with some clotheslines. And he ended up driving some shoulders into Wheeler in the corner, and he hit a gut wrench slam. So Brock Anderson was wanting to hit the DDT on Wheeler, but Wheeler ended up escaping. So Anderson ended up taking down Wheeler with a double leg takedown. He then hit a DDT to Wheeler. Lee Johnson ended up following that up with a frog splash from the top rope, and he went for the cover. And Wheeler ended up getting his foot on the bottom rope. Arn Anderson and Tully Blanchard ended up bumping into each other at ringside. Arn ended up punching Tully to put him down, which that punch from Arn Anderson looked terrible, in my opinion. So Lee Johnson ended up grabbing Wheeler. Wheeler ended up making a blind tag to Harwood. And FTR ended up hitting the spike pile driver on Lee Johnson. And there you go. FTR ended up winning the match. Overall, this was a good tag team match between FTR, Lee Johnson, and Brock Anderson. So, but we finally got that, that bump into each other from Arn Anderson and Tully Blanchard. And then we had a hype video between Thunder Rosa and Mercedes Martinez. The two of them will have their match next Friday on Rampage. Should be a good match up there. And then we had a hype video for Serena Deeb. So we saw that. Serena Deeb, she's awesome. And then we had Jade Cargill versus Julia Hart. TBS Championship on the line. Jade Cargill defend the title. This was just a meh match here. Jade Cargill came out along with, of course, a smart Mark Sterling. Julia Hart ended up coming out along with Griff Garrison. Of course, Julia Hart was still sporting the eye patch from the missed attack by Malachi Black, which we saw, weeks back on Dynamite. So we had Cargill end up having some pyro during her entrance. Smart Mark Sterling was wearing a neck brace. So the match ended up starting, and Jade Cargill ended up grabbing a headlock on Julia Hart. Hart ended up sending Cargill off the ropes. Cargill ended up delivering a shoulder tackle to Julia Hart. Cargill ended up hitting Hart with a tilt-a-whirl backbreaker, and she ended up dropping an elbow. So Jade Cargill was shown doing some push-ups and some sit-ups, just showing off, as always. Julia Hart ended up catching Jade Cargill with a roll-up from behind. Cargill ended up kicking out. Julia Hart ended up trying to run some clotheslines to Jade Cargill, but Julia Hart ended up forcing Cargill into the corner, and she ended up bringing her out with a Hurricanrana, and she went for the cover. Jade Cargill ended up kicking out too. So Jade Cargill ended up hitting a pump kick to Julia Hart, and Cargill followed it up. She then ended up hitting Jade, and she ended up going for the cover. And there you go. Jade Cargill wins the match and retains the TBS Championship. So Jade Cargill is now 26-0. And of course, you got the graphic shown on the screen to reinforce that. So it said 26-0. So there you go. Jade Cargill still undefeated. But overall, very meh match. And then we had Mark Henry. Mark Henry was talking to Jurassic Express and also Private Party. Matt Hardy ended up saying that this is a new and improved Private Party. Christian Cage ended up saying that Matt Hardy was never on his level when it comes to tag team wrestling. And the same is true when it comes to Private Party and Jungle Boy and Luchasaurus. Jungle Boy ended up saying that either Private Party isn't good enough or Matt Hardy isn't leading them well enough. So that was what the teams had to say. And then we end up seeing what we're going to see next week on Dynamite this Wednesday. It's going to be, of course, CM Punk versus MJF. This is, of course, going to be in Chicago. Dynamite's going to be in Chicago this Wednesday. So we're going to be getting CM Punk versus MJF. Should be a good matchup there. Nyla Rose versus Ruby Soho. Malachi Black and Brody King versus Pac and Penta El Zero Miedo. That's going to be a good matchup there between them. And then next Friday on Rampage, we're going to see Mercedes Martinez versus Thunder Rosa. And the FTW Championship is going to be on the line where Ricky Starks is going to defend the title against Jay Lethal. So that's what we're going to be seeing on Rampage next Friday. And the matches that we're going to see on Dynamite, we're going to see this Wednesday. Main event, Jungle Boy and Luchasaurus versus Private Party. AEW World Tag Team titles on the line. And this was a good matchup here. We had the Gun Club, Austin and Colton Gunn. They were sitting at ringside. So we had Luchasaurus. He ended up joining at the Gun Club, and Private Party ended up taking advantage of that. They end up hitting the Gin and Juice on Jungle Boy, and they end up going for the cover. Jungle Boy ended up kicking out at 2. So they were like, oh, the match is not going to end quickly there. So Mark Quinn ended up maintaining control over Jungle Boy. Isaiah Cassidy ended up getting a tag. Jungle Boy ended up moving, and Mark Quinn and Isaiah Cassidy ended up missing. Jungle Boy ended up escaping, tagging Luchasaurus. Private Party ended up rolling to the outside. Luchasaurus ended up heading outside after Private Party. And Matt Hardy ended up hitting Luchasaurus in the leg with a chair. So Private Party was in control of Luchasaurus as Rampage came back from the commercial. Andrade El Idolo was watching from the crowd. And it's reminding us that this is now the AHFO. So Luchasaurus ended up trying to drag Private Party across the ring so he can make the tag to Jungle Boy. Private Party ended up overpowering on Luchasaurus. Luchasaurus ended up escaping, and he ended up tagging in Jungle Boy. Jungle Boy ended up sending Isaiah Cassidy and Mark Quinn to the outside. He did some dives to Private Party to the outside. Jungle Boy ended up rolling Isaiah Cassidy back to the ring. Cassidy ended up reversing into a spinning kick to Jungle Boy, and he went for the cover. Jungle Boy kicked out 2. Isaiah Cassidy then ended up climbing up to the top rope. Jungle Boy ended up cutting off. Isaiah Cassidy climbed up to the top. Mark Quinn came in. He ended up getting Jungle Boy on his shoulders. Luchasaurus then ended up getting Jungle Boy on his shoulders. Isaiah Cassidy ended up diving off the top. Jungle Boy ended up reversing it into a power slam, which was awesome. And he went for the cover. And Cassidy ended up kicking out at 2. So we had Luchasaurus end up scooping up Mark Quinn. Quinn was able to reverse that. He ended up setting up Isaiah Cassidy to hit the silly string on Luchasaurus. Jungle Boy then ended up catching Isaiah Cassidy in the snare trap, and Mark Quinn ended up landing a awesome looking shooting star press from the top rope, and he broke up the hold. So Isaiah Cassidy ended up taking in Mark Quinn. Mark Quinn ended up putting Jungle Boy on the top rope. And Pirate Party ended up going for the Gin and Juice. Jungle Boy ended up reversing that into the Destroyer. He tagged in Luchasaurus, and they ended up beating Pirate Party. So Luchasaurus and Jungle Boy, Jurassic Express, they won the match, retaining the AEW World Tag Team titles. And that was how Rampage went off the air. Overall, good match, and Rampage was a good show. But anyways, that's it for my review of Smackdown and AEW Rampage. Thank you all for watching. Hope you all enjoyed this review. Definitely give the video a thumbs up, comment, subscribe, and I will see you all back here tomorrow night for the Royal Rumble review. So until then, see you all later.